I only slept a few hours when I went to bed, and feeling that I could not sleep anymore, got up. I had hung my shaving glass by the window and was just beginning to shave. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I started, for it had amazed me that I had not seen him since the reflection of the glass covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but did not notice it at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, I turned to the glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me, and I could see him over my shoulder. But there was no reflection of him in the mirror. The whole room behind me was displayed, but there was no sign of a man in it, except myself. This was startling, and coming on the top of so many strange things was beginning to increase that vague feeling of uneasiness which I always had when the Count is near. But at the instant I saw that the cut had bled a little, and the blood was trickling over my chin. I laid down the razor, turning as I did so half round to look for some sticking plaster. When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with some sort of demonic fury, and he suddenly made a grab at my throat. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there. Dracula had such an impact on vampires now and the time period it was written.
Bram Stoker's now legendary novel, Dracula, is not just any piece of cult-spawning fiction, but rather a time capsule containing the popular thoughts, ideas, and beliefs of the Victorian era that points to an elaborate picture of what society was like for Bram Stoker's generation. The dated ideas reflected in Dracula focus primarily on the concepts of lust, sex, and evil as they were viewed during the late 19th and 20th century, and what we can be viewed as a strongly conservative society. At the time, sex and homosexuality were controversial topics. Such beliefs are boldly represented throughout the book and often centered on the glorifying resistance of temptation while advertising against the inevitable temptation to taste the forbidden fruit. Dracula was written and published before the suffrage movement had taken off, leaving the expectations and standards of women extremely limited. The patriarchal tendencies and views of the Victorian society further enforce male superiority and dominance over women, which in turn also provide countless excuses to justify male sexuality and carnal urges.
Tales about creatures resembling vampires have existed in various cultures, dating back to the beginning of human culture itself. Such creatures may be demons that suck blood or reanimated corpses. King Vikram promises a magician that he will bring him a beetle, a spirit that animates dead bodies. He finds the beetle hanging from a tree like a bat. The beetle tells Vikram stories that end in riddles, and Vikram must guess the riddles or lose the beetle before he can present it to the magician. When Sir Richard Burton translated the Beetle Pisici into English, he called it the Vikram and the Vampire. However, by calling the beetle a vampire, Burton was connecting his story to what he had already become a popular literary figure. Like any author, he was attempting to boost sales. The vampire, as we know, it comes primarily from Eastern European folklore, filtered through a long literary tradition. Burton's friend Bram Stoker may have been influenced by the story of the beetle in his creation of Count Dracula. However, Stoker was certainly more heavily influenced by Eastern European folklore.
Some people say Bram Stoker loosely based Dracula's character on a Romanian tyrant from the 15th century, Vlad the Impaler, which is a legend. A medieval prince, Vlad and Dracula both fought against the Turks in their mortal lives. A lot of people assume that Dracula was based on Vlad because Vlad was a member of the noble family house of Dracula Testi, whose title translated to Voivode Dracula in English. Stoker had written notes that he read an extremely dry and boring history book named Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. He wasn't inspired by the book itself, but by a footnote which said that Dracula in Witchalian language means devil. That's where he got the name. More of his inspiration was based off earlier fictional vampires and his own imagination. Stoker's son, Irving, said that his father claimed Dracula started in a nightmarish dream after eating too much dressed crab.
In 1897, a Gothic horror novel Dracula was written by an Irish author, Bram Stoker. It was published on May 26, 1987. Stoker spent 7 years researching European folklore and stories of vampires. The Dead Undead was one of Stoker's original titles for Dracula. The original name of the Count was supposed to be Count Vampire. He used Dracula after reading an account of the principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia with the political observations relative to them. The name Dracula was the patronym of the descendants of Vlad II and Wallachia. In the Romanian language, the word Dracul can mean either the dragon or, especially in today's world, the devil.
Since the novel Dracula was published 118 years ago, in 1897, vampires are still a popular topic today. Although, compared to how vampires were described when Dracula was first published, the description of the pointy-toothed creature sharply contrasts. Hollywood has taken the monstrous figure and glammed it up. Instead of this creature that gains youth by sucking blood, with pointed claws and magical powers like transforming into a wolf or a fog, Hollywood has made the common vampire pretty and, most commonly, the victim with a long chaotic past that made them become a vampire. For example, the movie Twilight. Hollywood made the story centered around a pretty mysterious vampire named Edward that Bella, a human, falls in love with. Edward is made out to be a handsome teenager who never gets old, and instead of being weakened by the sun, sparkles. Also, instead of being a bloodthirsty vampire, he's a vegetarian that only eats animals and is trying to fit into society. Along with how Hollywood has changed the view of vampires, some people even act as if they are a vampire. They sharpen their teeth, sharpen their nails, and dress like they're about to go to a funeral.